Alright, it's the off season here, and a little cool, not cold yet, but this has been sitting around, and I know at the end of last season it was, I'd worked on this before, but now it's starting to burn a little oil. You can see the white smoke coming out of the muffler there. And I checked the compression. One side is okay, the other side is kind of low, and I think that's where the this needs new rings on the piston. So while it's off season and the weather's fairly nice out here, so I'm going to go ahead and yank this engine and replace the piston rings and whatever else I see in there. But like I said, I worked on this before, and it was really actually running really good. But I'm going to do the work while it's just sitting out here doing nothing, and by next year it's going to be running really good. This has 400 plus hours on it, and but it's going to be rebuilt. It's a 25 horsepower Briggs Stratton V-Twin 48-inch cut. It's really a pretty nice deal. So I'll get started on this and show you what to do to prep and take this motor out, and then we'll dig down and replace the rings. So the first thing, you can see I took the hood off. That one's missing the grill on it, but simply you take it off. I'm going to drain the oil. Found a little bin or bucket, whatever you can squeeze in between there without, I didn't feel like lifting up the mower. But so first thing is change the oil. I'm going to drain the oil, I mean. So there we go. And this is actually fairly new oil. It's a little discolored, but I had changed it at the end of the season. And I'm going to take the battery off. And then also disconnect your starter. That's off. Now disconnect your cable harnesses here and here. Now I'm going to take off the top cover and the filter cover, everything here, and remove all this. This flywheel cover, I believe it's an 8mm. Take off the filter cover. And go around and remove all the bolts on the cover here. This is a 3/8. Alright, all the bolts are removed. Should come right out. There you go. Alright, so I'm going to disconnect the fuel hose here going in the carburetor, and then take these two bolts off for the gas pump and just set it aside. So take that off, make sure you disconnect the hose up here, the vacuum hose here, and just swing that out of the way. Alright, the shield is off, and you can see I was able to drop the muffler down too. And we'll take these two bolts off and remove this fan on the flywheel. Here are your cables. Here's your throttle and the choke. And I believe these are T20s. You can just loosen these here and take your cables off. Same thing here. And then swing them around the side. So now we'll take a look up underneath. You can see the electric clutch there. And there is a bolt underneath to take off. And then when you lower the clutch, be sure the alignment and everything is there. And on this particular one, the cable is on the other side. Sometimes they're on this side. But you know, take the cable off too. It's just a simple click, like one of these. So you get under here with your ratchet, and of course it's going to spin, you see. So go up here and hold the flywheel, or if you have an impact wrench, I'm going to do it with a regular, just a 3/8 inch wrench, and see if I can break it loose and holding the flywheel there. So on this particular model, you can see it has this tensioner bar. Be careful and don't let it spring on you. And what that does, it loosens the spring on this tensioner pulley here so that you can take off the belt. You can see that. And there's the tensioner pulley. So when you engage that, this tensioner pulley is really, you know, fairly tight, and of course keeps the blade on. But there we go. So here is the plug for the electric clutch. So you can see this little bar right here. It extends over and drops down, and that's where the alignment hole is for the electric clutch. Now that's just on this particular model. Other models are different. Some of them have a bar like this that actually drops down on each side, and it makes sure that the belt is not going to fly off. But they all align in similar fashion. There's going to be some linkage in there where it lines up, and you can see the cable is on that side, on the left side, looking from the driver's seat, and on other models it's over here on the right. But that's ready to drop. So I'll continue taking that single bolt, and when you take the bolt off, I don't know if I can. Alright, so there's the bolt. I'm just going to leave it sitting there. And you can see there's a keyway that lines that up onto your drive shaft. So that's your mowing deck belt. Now there's also a drive belt under here. You can see it. So you get the drive belt loosened off, and this pulley will drop. So I don't know if you can see that. If you look up underneath, that tension pulley, you can see I've already dropped the drive pulley down. Well, that tensioner pulley, you're going to do it by hand, or on this model it's actually the parking brake. Depress it and keep it locked in, and that's what's compressing the idler pulley. So you can take the belt off, and you'll have easier access to the last bolt here holding the engine on. And go around and double check, make sure you've got everything disconnected. Yeah, you can see it's jiggling around here. Everything's ready to go. So we'll lift the motor off and put it on the bench. Alright, there we go. It's on the bench. You can see it's upside down. And I usually have it sitting on a couple of blocks. One of these days I'm going to make a fixture for it to sit in. But for now it's okay. and I can still spin it so that when you're putting the pistons, connecting rod or whatever, in this case replacing the piston rings, at least we can go back and forth and make sure that it is moving without any snags or any resistance on it. But we have it upside down, so we can take off, I believe there's 9 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 bolts, and then the governor linkage here. So we'll loosen these bolts. Sometimes I crisscross, sometimes I don't. On taking them off, putting them on, yes, definitely there's a pattern to follow along with the torque specs. So with the governor linkage here, you can see this little bolt. See if you can see it better that way. Here's the bolt. You loosen it. You don't have to take it all the way off. Loosen it up, and then get a screwdriver and spread out the clamp here, and you'll be able to pull this off. You'll be able to slide it off the notch there. I don't know if you can see that well. And get a little flathead or whatever you've got. And you can spread that clamp open. And there you go. So I never take it all the way off. You can see the springs down in here. Just leave them connected and let the governor linkage sit. Saves a lot of hassle. If you're going to take it all the way off, definitely take a photo so that you'll see what spring goes where. But for right now, I just let it hang. Then we can finish taking off these bolts. And so after you got all the bolts off and your governor off, you can go around, and you can see this is already gapping out pretty good. But I would go around and just gently start loosening that cover off, and think of it while you're pulling it off. Guide pins are here, and another one on the other side. So those are the main points. Just make sure you're lifting it straight up. Sometimes they're really tough to get off, but you can see, yeah, back over here, these little notches. It gives you something where you can put a pry bar and get some leverage on it. But if you don't have to do that, don't. You don't want to crack any of the pan or anything around it. So yeah, see that one lifted straight up. Yep, it's ready to go. And you'll hear a little clank right here. You see that? This goes in the assembly up underneath. It's your oil, the oil pump, and you'll be replacing this from the top when you take this top cover off. But we'll get there. Alright, I got the cover off. Everything looks good. All the gearing and everything looks fine. The cam gear looks good. What we'll do now, we'll take the valve covers off and release the valve springs, so that we can reduce the tension, and we'll be able to lift the camshaft out. Because right now it's under pressure, of course, with the springs on the valves. So we'll take these valve covers off. I believe there are 3/8 bolts. And on each side, do the same thing. We'll go in, compress the spring like this, so you can take the disconnect the push rods. And what that's doing, it's releasing pressure on the camshaft so that we can take it out. So here's our camshaft. You can see it's loosened up now. We should be able to lift it out. There we go. It looks to be in good shape. The lobes don't look like there's any wear on them. So as you can see, I've taken the shield off on both sides, and I usually put the bolts back in just to make sure I don't lose them. And I've taken the spark plugs off on both sides so that we won't be dealing with any compression while we're working on the pistons. So now I'm going to take off the head here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 bolts holding that on. We've got a bolt under here on this bracket, and then the 2 bolts for the intake manifold there. And we won't bother taking this off, and it'll just come out with that head assembly. Alright, so I got all the bolts off. That's the 5 bolts, plus the 2 on the intake manifold, and 1 on this bracket that for the carburetor linkage. And this should come out. There we go. Alright, you can see I rotated the crankshaft around so we have easy access to these 2 bolts. Make sure that when you're taking these off, use a ratchet or an open-end wrench or whatever, but just be sure not to strip these when you're taking them on or off, or you'll be either retapping or buying another connecting rod. Alright, so that's the last. Got both those bolts off. Now this, sometimes you'll feel like it's wedged in, but sometimes, yep, there it goes. Came out pretty easy. There's that piece. And there's the piston. You can see it moving there, so I'll shove it forward, and I'll get on this side so we can pull this piston the rest of the way out. And there we go. And you see where that's situated here is number 2. When you're working on number 1, it's the flip side. So number 1 goes that way, number 2 goes this way. So when you're putting these on, be extra careful. When you're spreading them apart to slide them on, don't twist it or anything, or it could break. Now this first one to put on, this is the oil control ring, and just like here on number 2, it has this oil control expander, which is that little spring looking thing. That needs to go on first. Then you put the ring over it. So you can see it's kind of loose fitting, but when you put this over it, it compresses the spring and gives you the oil seal. So you can see how I'm just going to be gently sliding it down until I can get it over that expander ring and into the groove, into the slot. There we go. Let me rotate it around and make sure. So here's the second one. Make sure you get the correct one. The one with 2 marks is the middle one. The one with the single mark is the top. So that's it. I'm just going to do the same thing, just gently slide it in until I can get it into the ring. Nope. And there's the last one. Alright, there we go. So I'm going to take a look at the cylinder. Maybe I'll go ahead and rehone it. Might as well while we have it off. Then we'll insert the piston, and the same thing while we're putting these in, you know, compressing the rings so that it'll slide into the cylinder. So this is the tool I use to rehone. This is kind of a medium to small size. I got this so that I can fit these pistons, and on brakes or anything like that on a brake cylinder, this will also fit that. So you put it on your drill, let it pop open, and then start rehoning it. Alright, so that's what I'll do for a little while. I doubt if you can see that on the camera, but it's doing a fairly good job. My battery's about to go out on my cordless. So, alright, so the number 1 cylinder is done. Now I'm back on this number 2 cylinder. I just wanted to shorten the video a bit, but I did the exact same thing over here. So when you're putting this in, make sure the number 2 is showing face up in number 2 cylinder. So, and put a light coat of oil on the cylinder so it'll be easier to slide everything in. So you slide it in. Oops. And what you want to do as you compress the rings, of course there's a tool you can do this with. It's like a sleeve that you put over, and it compresses the rings and you're able to slide it in. But I don't have that, so what you do, like this third one, you see I'm compressing the rings by hand, and it'll help if you have a little precision screwdriver or something to help you along. And I can tell this is a much tighter fit than when taking it off. But you get the idea. You just compress them down and slide everything in. There we go. Alright, so the piston is in. Now we'll go down to the connector arm. Just start bolting everything back together, and remember when you're putting this half back on, do the proper torque, and I'm going to put, I always put some Loctite on there just in case. Alright, so we've got the piston in, the connecting rod is connected. I'm going to go ahead and put the camshaft back in, and make sure you line up the marks there. You can see this mark here and the little dot on the tooth. Yep, there we go. And that is in and lined up. So now I'll go in here and, of course, you know, check your gasket, make sure if it's good or bad. If you can't use, you know, scrape it off, do the regular thing, put the gasket on. We can put the heads back on. Then we'll put, we'll continue on. We'll put the push rods back on. It's just putting it all back together. All right, so the head is back on. Everything's bolted down. Be sure to torque it down following the instructions. When you're putting the push rods back in, and you've probably seen this before in other videos, but the aluminum one goes for the intake and the steel one goes for the exhaust side. So it'll be in that order, this on top, this on bottom. But remember, this is, the engine's upside down, so this is actually the aluminum on the top where the intake is, and the steel one on the bottom where the exhaust is. Alright, the push rods are in on both sides, and we'll go ahead and put the valve covers on, and I'm just going to tighten them up just loosely because I know we're going to go back and once we put everything back together, we're going to have to go back and use a feeler gauge and adjust these valves. That's it. The rest of it, well, I'll show you once we put this whole thing back in place. But with this, go ahead and do the regular thing with the gasket. Make sure everything's cleaned off. Alright, I got all the bolts in place. I'm getting ready to torque these down. You can see the instructions here. It shows the pattern of, you know, the crisscross pattern to do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And the torque says tighten it to 1/3, then 2/3, and then the final torque. But the final torque value is 325 pounds per inch, which translates to 27 pounds per foot. And make sure you make that distinction there. So my torque wrench here is foot pounds, so I'm going to tighten them down to 25 or 27. Now I had already did it by hand, tightened down and went around the circuit there, and I'm ready to do the final torque. So let me get this adjusted. Number 2. Three, 4, and you go around, just follow the pattern. And don't forget this little cover here. So I already have them loosened up. Take that little cover off, and that's where this little pin goes in. And this is actually the oil pump. So you take this little gear off, drop your pin in, and twist around till it seats. Okay, it's seated down, and that is seating down into the camshaft. So you get this lined up. And there she blows. And just screw it back in. So now we can put the governor back on. So when you take a look at it, make sure all your springs are still in place where they should be. I can usually do it by hand, but if not, just get a 1/4 inch or whatever size that is, and rotate it all the way clockwise, and then tighten down your nut. And that's it. After that, we'll put the spark plugs back on, put our shields back on, and it's going to be ready to drop back onto the mower. So I'm about to mount the engine here. You can see it's on its side. And I guess this is a good spot to look from above here. So you see these brackets and whatnot. That's how you line up your the clutch. Make sure that's lined up. You can put this pulley on first, put your drive belt on, And everything is, you can see it's keyed when you're lining it up. That's probably about the only thing that can be kind of tough if you haven't done it before. Just make sure everything's lined up the way it was when you took it out. Mount the engine and start hooking everything up. Your throttle cables, throttle and choke. Don't forget to connect your electric clutch there, your starter, the gas, fuel, just everything. Just put it right back together. So I probably won't show all the detail, the gory detail there. It's just putting it all back together the way you took it off. But I'll just mount the engine back on and we'll give it a test run. Alright, it's all back together. Battery's hooked up, everything's there. I'm not sure if the battery is fully charged, but we're about to find out. Crank it up and see if it still has the white smoke coming out. Alright, that solved that problem. The only thing I did not do, come to think of it, after hearing it a couple of backfires there, I did not check the valves. So I want to go in there and double check and make sure the valves are adjusted properly. And that will probably get rid of the little backfiring we heard there. So, but that's it. Changing the rings, that solved the white smoke problem. That's it.